So let's get started. The reason for this workshop today, in all the organizations that I've worked in the past, there's always been an abundance of resources when it comes to technical training. So things like Tableau, Power BI, any visualization tool you can name. There's always an abundance of resources your company can provide in order to learn those tools well. Online courses, trainings, groups, what have you. And there are specifically a lot of dedicated groups to this. I've been in organizations where there's Tableau Tuesdays or Power BI parties, and everybody can jump in and workshop the dashboards that they're developing for their stakeholders. But in no organization have I worked in has there ever been a communication workshop, a place where all of us as data professionals can come in and work on how are we going to communicate these insights to our stakeholders that we've worked so hard to derive. So that's the point of this workshop today, to fill in that void in available company training and resources. So today, what I'm going to be covering is if you have a dashboard that you're interested in presenting during an interview, or you have a dashboard that you're interested in presenting to an important stakeholder, or even the CEO of your company, I'm going to show you the tips and tricks, the best practices for making sure you have that presentation and deliver it in an effective manner for those audiences. So to get us started, I'm going to share my screen and present the first dashboard of this workshop. All right, so this one is the Public Sector Emergency Calls Dashboard. This is created by Rebecca Finlay, and it shows an overview of the emergency calls taking place in Atlanta, Georgia. To get us started, I'm going to show you the wrong way to present a dashboard. All right, here we go. So this dashboard shows public sector emergency calls in Atlanta, Georgia. At the top, you can see some important KPIs, total callouts off target, callouts on target. And at the bottom, we have a map visualization. You can get a little more granular detail, even some tool tips showing for each location what was the on versus off target performance. And on the right-hand side, we also have some column graphs over time, showing time to arrival, dispatch, and en route. And also for those specific dates, you can also zoom in. What was the on versus off target performance? Extra cool feature on the top, this control button flips, and you can have all the filters you need to filter down the scope to the data you're interested in seeing. What I just did is probably a dashboard presentation style that you're familiar with in your organization. Please do put in the comments if this is something that you're familiar with hearing in the organizations that you work in. Now, that may have sounded very professional, it may have sounded very smooth, but there was a key component missing in there. What I didn't deliver was, why does this matter to the person I'm talking to? How can they actually use it to solve the business use cases at hand? So what I'm going to show you today is an exact framework, a storytelling framework for showing instead of telling. And this is how I outline it. It goes goals, issues, and then actions. Why this is so powerful is it uses the power of story. Story is one of the most powerful tools we have as human communicators to engage our audiences. Technical presentations tend to be very complex. They tend to be very boring. And especially for non-technical audiences, it's hard for them to be engaged and fully understand what's going on unless you use the power of story. So what I'm going to do with you now is I'm going to build this dashboard presentation from the ground up using the goals, issues, and actions framework. So first, a goal. The purpose of this dashboard is to demonstrate an overview of public sector emergency calls in the city of Atlanta, Georgia. We're going to be looking at the reporting period in March 2022 for the purposes of this presentation. Now, you can see at the top important KPIs, total callouts off target, and callouts on target. What's apparent immediately is that we don't have 100% on target performance. Ideally, we would like 100%. There's still a margin, a little bit of wiggle room where we're not hitting things on target. So we need to figure out what that is. So what I just did there is I established the goal of the presentation. Now I'm going into the issue. The issue is we want to make sure that these 80 off-target calls, ideally we want to reduce to 0. So let's investigate a little further to figure out what's going on here. I'm going to go to another tab, which provides a little more granular detail. On this tab, you can see a graph in the top right corner showing average distance on the x-axis and average time to arrival on the y-axis. What this means, the further along you go along the x-axis, the further that emergency vehicles have to go from their starting point to where the emergency situation is taking place. And on the y-axis, the further up you go, that means the longer time it takes for those emergency vehicles to go from the starting place to the ending point. Immediately, what's apparent in this graph is that there's a bit of an outlier, AFRD Station 2. What's immediately apparent is that it takes an average distance much longer than all the other stations to travel, also a relatively large amount of time to arrive, and according to this color gradient, a relatively high number of total missed targets. So this is a good example to dive a little deeper into what's going on with our off-target performance. AFRD Station 2 is in this graph on the left-hand side. This graph shows top stations by their percentage of callouts on target. So for AFRD Station 2, we have 82.8% on-target performance, which means 17% roughly is off-target. There's a big margin that we'd like to fill. AFRD Station 2 has 5 missed targets, so that's the 17% we're talking about. Now, for even more granular detail, let's pop open the control panel. You can filter down into the exact station of interest using this filter. So AFRD Station 2 in this case. You can see over time how many callouts that it had to address. And specifically at the end of the month, there's a larger amount of callouts than usual. So perhaps what's going on, and here is where I'm getting to the action part of the framework. So what's going on is that there might be a staff shortage causing the off-target performance. Perhaps toward the end of the month, they got swamped with a lot of calls. They were not able to deliver on the performance that is expected. What we need to do, and here's where I'm giving the specific call to action. What we need to do is gather more data to figure out if a staff shortage is the cause of the off-target performance. From there, we can determine the right course of action to take. So what I did there was I just demonstrated to you the goals, issues, and actions framework, how powerful a story can be. But what I also hope to convey through that is the importance of bringing in concrete examples to walk your stakeholders through during the presentation. What I've seen a lot happen in the presentations I've been part of in workplaces is dashboard developers will go into the presentation, show all the cool features of the dashboard like I demonstrated to you before. And when stakeholders press them and they ask, so how can we use this? Why is this important? They'll try and come up with examples on the spot. They'll try and do this. They'll look at, okay, here's the station filter. Let's check out maybe station 14. Let's see if that's something interesting there. 21, maybe 22. They don't know what to look for because they haven't done the prep beforehand for the stakeholders in the audience. What I highly recommend is before any dashboard presentation, come prepared with the goals, issues, actions framework, have that outlined in your mind, and also have specific examples to walk them through. You remember from this presentation I just gave, AFRD Station 2, because I mentioned it multiple times and I walked you through an example end to end showing how we could improve its performance. So again, I recommend goals, issues, and actions, and coming with concrete examples.